Welcome back. You're watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Thank you for being here. Just moments ago, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar responded to what critics are calling an unprecedented diplomatic disaster. The Congresswoman herself is calling it, quote unquote, an affront after she and fellow Democratic lawmaker Rashida Tlaib have just been banned from entering Israel. The rejection upends the trip that they were planning to take this upcoming weekend. Congresswoman Tlaib has yet to respond, but Omar wrote this, quote, Trump's Muslim ban is what Israel is implementing, this time against two duly elected members of Congress. Omar and Tlaib are the first Muslim women to ever serve in Congress. And the Congresswoman goes on to say, quote, as a member of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, it is my job to conduct oversight of foreign aid from the United States of America and to legislate on human rights practices around the world. She writes, the irony of the only democracy in the Middle East making such a decision is that it is both an insult to democratic values and a chilling response to a visit by government officials from an allied nation. Israeli Prime Minister, meantime, Benjamin Netanyahu said that the two women's purpose for the visit was, quote unquote, negating the legitimacy of Israel. Congresswoman Omar and Tlaib support BDS, that is the movement to boycott Israel in protest of its policies against Palestinians. Israel announced the denial of entry after President Trump tweeted that it would show, quote, great weakness if these two congresswomen were not banned. So let's start with CNN's Oren Lieberman. He's live in Jerusalem. What more are you hearing, Oren?
Well, there's a lot that's unprecedented to this. First, President Donald Trump's tweet saying Israel would be showing great weakness by letting them in. Basically, Trump trying to dictate to Israel what its foreign policy should be, and perhaps more importantly, leaving Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu very little wiggle room in terms of what his decision would be. Netanyahu has never publicly disagreed with Trump, and he wasn't about to start now. A short time after that tweet, the announcement came first from the deputy foreign minister and then from Netanyahu himself that the Israeli government had officially, and this is the other unprecedented part, decided to deny entry to two American duly elected congresswomen. And that is something that hasn't happened here before. Israel relying upon a law that was passed about 2.5 years ago that allows it to bar entry to anyone who supports a boycott of Israel. But this is certainly the most high-profile use of that law since it was passed and since it was enacted. It's also worth noting this is a reversal of Israel's policy. About a month ago, it was Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, considered one of those closest to Netanyahu, who said out of a respect for the U.S. Congress, Israel would allow these two congresswomen to visit. That lasted all up until this afternoon with Trump's tweet, and then the official statement coming from the Israeli government and from Netanyahu. Well, criticism has come from all over the place, including, interestingly enough, from the pro-Israel American lobby, AIPAC, which normally sides with Trump and Netanyahu, saying this time that although, yes, these congresswomen might be anti-Israel, it was still better to allow them to enter the country, to learn, to see, and to meet. So an unusual rift there between AIPAC and Trump and Netanyahu. Criticism also coming from Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, Congressman Steny Hoyer, all of them saying, look, it would be better to interact with them, to interface with them, and to let them learn about Israel on what was supposed to be about a 4-day trip to Israel and the Palestinian territories, a trip that we now know will no longer happen, barring some, what would be frankly an even more surprising reversal on the part of Israel, which I don't really expect at this point at all.
Oren, let me just ask you, because we saw the Netanyahu's statement on who they would not be visiting with. Do you know, were they planning to meet with members of Israeli government?
According to organizers of the trip, they weren't supposed to meet any government officials on either side. They were going to meet civil service groups, human rights organizations, as well as peace activists, Israeli and Palestinian. We did speak with a Democratic congressional aide familiar with the trip who said that Congresswoman Omar was planning to meet first with former U.S. Ambassador to Israel Dan Shapiro, who lives in Israel, as well as some members of Israel's Knesset, though that aide did not say which members of Israel's Knesset. Omar, let's not forget, is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Those meetings, of course, will now no longer be happening.
Oren Lieberman, thank you very much. In Jerusalem, with me now, Democratic Congressman Andre Carson of Indiana. Congressman Carson, thank you so much for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
Just first, your response, obviously, A, to Israel banning these two sitting members of Congress, and B, to the fact that a U.S. president is essentially telling a foreign country and an ally not to let them in.
I'm deeply disappointed. Israel has been an important ally to the United States for countless years, and for them to allow a tweet from President Trump to influence them is akin to a bully taking a kid's lunch money at school.
So you say Israel's being bullied by Trump. Have you talked to either of these? Have you talked to either of these congresswomen about this?
Not yet. I mean, we talked about the trip. I have a conflicting a commitment that wouldn't allow me to attend the trip, but I'm deeply disappointed. I mean, we have two democratically elected members of Congress who are serving our country phenomenally well. For them to be prevented from entering into the country, I think it speaks to a kind of political opportunism on the sides of both Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, who both face questionable reelection efforts. And so this effort at political expediency disappoints me because it raises the point, how deeply are they concerned about strengthening the relationship between the United States and Israel? Or are they just concerned about both their far right-wing constituents?
I want to come back to Netanyahu in a second, but we've seen the statement from Congresswoman Omar. What would you advise these congresswomen to do? What are their options?
Well, I think they're smart. I mean, colleagues are speaking out, myself and others, Speaker Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, other rank and file members are speaking out. Even AIPAC has spoken out against this measure, which is saying a lot. And so I think globally people see that this is a grave injustice and it doesn't look well for Israel. My appeal is to Prime Minister Netanyahu, who I've met with on several occasions, to reconsider this ban, not for political expediency, but for the sake of all democracies across the globe.
I should also add to your list of folks speaking out, even Republican Senator Marco Rubio, talking about how he disagrees with these ladies on policy, but he said denying them entry into Israel is a mistake. Now, Netanyahu mentioned the boycott movement, right, known as the BDS movement, and you're one of only 17 people in the House to support it. Can you tell me why?
Well, for me, it was about allowing free speech. No government, no individual, no group of people, no person, including myself, is above reproach, criticism, critique. And I think if you consider yourself to have democratic values, if you consider yourself to be a democracy, you should be self-aware enough or self-critical enough to have enough of an approach to self-analysis to be able to accept criticisms and critiques to strengthen your policies and to strengthen your nation. And so to stop this kind of dissent, to stop this kind of criticism of the Israeli policies as it relates to settlement expansion, as it relates to the mistreatment of Palestinians, as it relates to the mistreatment of Africans, i.e. Ethiopian Jews, I think there has to be a reassessment about the direction that the great state of Israel wants to take.
Congressman Andre Carson, thank you very much. Appreciate
What an
your
honor.
opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.